We're here for your second solo show at Elms Lesters. The first one was called Paintings, Pots and Prints, and this one's called A New Understanding, and the work has really developed. Tell us what a new understanding means to you.
I guess it was coming to a point of how I was working for my previous show, Paintings, Pots and Prints, where I was taking on board kind of new materials and working in 3 dimensions and a kind of a sculptural feel to it. And I got to a certain point where I kind of was happy with how I could depict a scene using my materials as such. And I thought there was more to go on from that, but it was trying to kind of work out the direction. It came with just asking a load of questions really, and trying to kind of find an answer to them within the paintings.
Let's just go a bit further back for you, because of another way, a true understanding for the uninitiated observer of your work is to understand something partly about art history and playing around with avant-garde isms and layering those. But let's talk about a more practical part of your past, which is having worked as a graphic designer, a graphic artist for a number of years and working with programs like Photoshop in their infancy. Tell us about that and your you know, the way you look at an image, that it's built up.
I think the beauty of that learning and training is it's almost using a package like Photoshop. You are your own master of time and space, as it were, where you can undo something, which of course artists from the past never had that opportunity. You had to do the big painting and then hope for the best. There's that beauty within that where it's almost you're given that second chance, third chance, fourth chance, where you can strive towards a better image or a better understanding of something.
Because you spend part of your time in the UK and part of your time in Brazil. Whether there's an element of influence from the ex-voto pieces that you see on the street in Brazil, where art is very much more part of people's living daily world. I mean, okay, through religion, mainly through these iconographic images of Mary or Christ. But I was thinking particularly of the piece in this show, which is a little light box with a 3/4 of Mary in perspex and a halo. Is that an inspiration to you, the fact that you're seeing these pieces of art, which are not by famous artists, on the streets all the time in Brazil?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, even the power of religion and art together, that you know, the iconographic sense of it's in everybody's home, and it's that permanent reminder for people of something in their lives, or to pray to, or redemption, solace, everything in one image. The better they're done, the better sculpture it is, or the better use of colours, or the more lights it has on it, the more kind of spiritually closer you feel to it, the object. And it's a very kind of visual country or city in São Paulo, where, you know, that, and in relation to also the street art, where graffiti's everywhere, but it's that injection of colour, where, you know, some of the poorest, roughest conditions, living conditions, there's beautiful murals around it, you know, and it's that invaluableness of art, that kind of, which plays such a part in these people's lives. You paint somebody's favela house and they'd be so happy that you've put a painting on their house for them.
Francis Bacon used to talk about this, these 2 different types of mark that you make in a painting, and that you must have both for the painting to be properly balanced and successful. So one kind of mark was a figurative mark, a linear mark. So I'm kind of talking about this now in relation to the work on the streets and your former life as a street artist, and whether you agree with this really. So one mark is this descriptive line. It's the thing which describes an ear or the side of a face. And this is something that always crops up in your work, isn't it? Just a suggestion of something that gives you an idea of a contour of the head. And then the other mark that Bacon talked about was this much more instinctive mark, which didn't have a descriptive role, but had a kind of emotional value, that it was difficult to verbalize. It just worked or it didn't. And he kind of didn't know where it came from. It's something that the 2 work together.
I mean, I guess you could say in my portraits that comes about in the kind of the general outline is that emotional thing, or the shadow under the chin, or the shoulder blade, where it's that foundation of where the head's sitting, or that kind of the drama of the shadow under the chin is that emotion. The ear is that kind of the painterly, and it is that theatre of line and form which helps to create that kind of composition. And I think as you do these kind of works, your eye darts about, and if you've done a figurative line, you want to balance that with something else. You can't. If you did a whole painting with the figurative, it would be a cartoon strip almost. You know, you have to play about.
Now, this is really a surprise. Through here is something that really came about kind of accidentally when you were working with the Perspex. Let's have a look.
That's right.
It's called See Through Jesus.
I wanted to make a kind of a crucifix sculpture, and with my newfound Perspex, you know, I thought yes, that would be the material to try with. And I was making this transparent see-through Jesus on this scaffolding cross. And just so happened in my studio, one of my light bulbs had gone, and then about a week later the other one went. So I was working in complete darkness, apart from my little floor lamp to give me light for the time being. And one afternoon it just happened to fall over, and it projected against the Perspex, and just kind of it acted like a kind of a projector prism effect, where the light just kind of shone out of it, like kind of a weird... a
kind of strange aura.
Yes, I thought this is cool. This is it. This is, it was by chance really that I got this effect, but it was something to kind of, go with, because it looks so interesting. It was using light within the sculpture to create an extra thing, like you say, this aura.
And it creates a kind of skeletal aura. I mean, it's strangely anatomical, but at the same time quite transcendent.
Yeah, it's like the
Turin Shroud.
Turin Shroud, that's it, exactly. It's that kind of... making it, I felt, a spiritual kind of feeling towards it. The whole thing was completed once the light goes through it, and it's like that key to religion itself, it's all there, but you have to believe in it. That's the key, and it's... it fascinates me again, the whole art and religion, the spiritual, the power of that image, the connotations and meanings it has for people. And this one, I made his eyes robotic, if you like. They turn every 10-20 seconds, so the viewer would get a nice kind of, if they noticed that subtle change, a shock, where they'd question again. A question again would be, did I see his eyes move? And then having to rationalise how that happened. And it's an interesting way of working, where you try and answer questions and give questions to people as well. It's a really fun piece to do.
It's a really memorable piece, and I love this little door that you've got here, like it's from one of these old Soho clubs. If you're not on the list, you're not coming in.
Well, that's where it came from. That's what it came off. So it's also kind of, it looks a bit like a kind of a confessional window. So it is, if you're in the club or not. So I'm pleased with that.
Now, Adam, this is a painting that encapsulates change. Rather than being the 3 ages of man, it's the kind of 3 stages of descent into drunkenness over an evening, isn't it?
That's it. It kind of all starts off the evening here. Here he is turning up with the booze and the energy. It's almost he's pointing at himself, really. It's the same person in effect. The wire coming out of the can, if you can see, is like a spiral movement coming out of that can, coming round, following his arm round. It ends up at this point where there's the drunk, the room spinning. He's had too much, and then as it continues on the back of his shoulder and his back, it kind of spins round. As the end result, it's the unconscious man slumped on the back of the chair. The hands move down. He's dropped the can. The wire comes down back into the can again. So the wire movement gives that kind of that narrative, if you like, that sense of dizziness and drunkenness.
We were talking earlier about this twist in the perspex, and when we look in more detail at this, we can see a kind of perspex visor over the final stage of the guy kind of coiling in on himself. And on the visor is this kind of stretched out ear and eye and cheekbone, and then the profile on the piece of perspex itself. So you're shaping this and cutting it and heating it and moving it. So looking at the arm here, there's a kind of twist in the arm, which is like the kind of double helix twist, which is echoed by this kind of spiral of the wire. And that becomes a kind of echo of the shadow of the arm. Are you trying to convey movement there? Is that the idea, that there's this kind of solidity and...
Yes, that's it, you know, as he's dropped the can. Also combining that with the light source of the lamp, if you like, you know, it's hitting his forearm first and foremost, and then as the movement goes, it kind of, the light's almost getting twisted round into the darkness of his knuckles and his, the veins in his hand. Same here with the motion of him drinking, you know, he's tipping it back towards himself. It's another kind of visual aid with the perspex, really. This was the starting point for it, where it was adding to the cardboard and adding to the fabric as a kind of an extra layer. And it's only here with the twist where it came about where I thought, well, actually I can give it its own dimension with shape and form and colour, and by simply twisting it, it opened up a whole new load of possibilities for it, really.
So what we've got here is a kind of different point of view. I was thinking it's almost like a crane shot at the end of a film, and the crane's kind of moving in on the action hero as he takes his last breath.
Yeah, again, it's that filmic kind of composition. I mean, he's just been hit by a car, so I wanted to capture that fleeting moment, that moment between life and death. I mean, it's a difficult thing to capture, but it's that beauty within chaos you get in life, where, you know, it's that cliche, but, you know, your life flashes in front of you. You see everything, from the texture of your t-shirt to the chrome on the grill to the flashing foliage, you know, and
that everything becomes kind of hyper real.
Yeah, that hyper real of everything, and that translates where he's looking at you through this eye. You know,
well, the eye is certainly hyper real. Where did you get hold of that?
That was from an antique dealer in the south of France. He had a whole box of like Victorian glass eyes, and they're great because, I mean, if you want to use an eye, you can paint an eye, but you never get as good as a real eye to create the feeling of an eye. So, and that's the main point of engagement within the painting. You know, he's looking right at you. So, yeah, it had to be a real eye for it. This was the first one. I used the canvas as a background to it. I mean, prior to that, it had always been cardboard, you know, completely. So having the canvas background, that was another surface to learn and work out how to use. So from a starting point, I thought, well, make it a room. So I kind of did the ceiling and the two walls, and it was a kind of a false 3D space, if you like. So then I added a doorway and a window, so then it was a room. So I thought, well, what can I put in this room? And I wanted it to kind of be a figurative one, but also kind of maybe play about with a degree of symbolism, if you like. I mean, this is a deathbed, you know, her father's dying, you know, she's kind of mourning, if you like, the husband with their child, and I often think of, you know, doors and windows as that kind of entry and exit, if you like. So he's exiting through that, he's looking up, he's exiting through the door, if you like. You know, the baby's almost coming in through the window, so it's that.
But there's a kind of transcendence to it, and it made me think of a certain kind of rondo painting, a tendency of painting the Holy Family that you might see in the Renaissance. I mean, all of those things are obviously in the background somewhere. But there is this kind of metaphysical, like you were talking about De Chirico, metaphysical idea of the baby kind of floating up or floating in. Is there also an element of self-portrait in this?
Yeah, I mean, it was around the time my son was born, or a baby, so when you have a family, then you're almost aware of mortality and, you know, other older members of your family getting older and your own time scale, if you like, and yeah, I guess that kind of tuned me into it.
This is grey painting, and it's a turning point, this painting, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of stuff came out of this one, really. It was, as with the experimental stuff, it often is the case where I wanted to try and marry together what I'd learnt with the painting and the expressionism with the more new sculptural elements and bringing the perspex in on top of that, and then from those forms adding stuff like wire and mesh, so it's a shift in materials as well. I wanted to depict the head turning, and to do that I wanted to break down line and form and colour, shadow, break it apart and reassemble it in a kind of a order where it became something else. So for example, you see the background, there's like a head looking this way in painted form and he's turning that way, so his nose from that point goes to there, which ends up as a wire form in silhouette. And the same as the earlobe here, kind of the outline of the earlobe also mimics the shape of the nose going around to form the other nose, so it's like lines and form overlapping to create a kind of like a useful abstraction, if you like. Using mesh, I wanted to create a kind of a blurred edge and outline from using the form of how mesh overlaps. Depending on how you move, the pattern of the mesh kind of gives a blurred effect. So it's really finding effects within materials. I mean, the same with the perspex. The perspex is sprayed with a kind of a skin tone vanishing into just pure perspex form, then it curves round and becomes kind of part of the eye socket or the nose, and it twists round to become something else. And it's where the 3D comes into use in terms of its depiction of other dimensions, if you like. Yeah, so with this one I wanted to push forward with that kind of thinking and use of materials, breaking down line and form is a language where, for example, the black within this is this black spiralling piece of perspex is the kind of shadow and the density of the matter. It's like a head turning. So if shadow took on an actual physical form and spiralling shape, what it would consist of, and the same as the flesh and skin, where the cheekbone, how it twists round to become the chin, if you like, the movement of flesh in its kind of time-space element. I mean, another interesting thing for me was learning about their kind of movement towards you, if you like. I mean, this is his
shoulder blade.
Shoulder blade. So if he's turning, the shoulder blade's moving towards you. So the light's hitting this first, and it's moving towards you like an orb of kind of light, if you like. So it's almost in the realms of abstraction in terms of shapes, but together I've kind of given them my own language and thinking of what they represent for the reason they're there.
And it's become more abstract because it's less easy to discern an eye or a mouth. It's become a kind of gristle and bone amalgam that's kind of moving and mutating. You're obviously interested in that sense of it almost kind of rotate without having to be animatronic, rotating in front of you. It uses, seems to take off from a point that you might see in the work of Naum Garbo when he came to England in for the first time in the late 1920s, early 1930s, and started using perspex for this first time. Starts to influence Henry Moore and Barbara Hepworth, this curvilinear thing. And the other thing that interested me was that where you've got this elongated perspex line, it almost becomes like a kind of painted mark, like a painted drip, and you're playing with that in the kind of expressionist background there.
Yeah, I mean I wanted to maintain my line as we talked about earlier about the the natural line,
Yeah.
the line of expression, and learning about the malleability of perspex, and as you heat it, what form it takes and how the movement of it changes, how you can play with that as if you were painting with sculpture. It sounds a funny thing to say, but it takes on its own kind of rhythm within itself, and as soon as you've twisted it, you're within another axis, another plane, another dimension. So the way you can twirl it and spiral it about, it's like three-dimensional painting as such, and especially being see-through, the transparency of it, and that combination of adding the spray to it, where you can fade away or fade in, or spray on the underside, giving it a shine or a matteness. You've got 5 or 6 combinations of elements, like a painterly language, but in 3 dimensions, if that makes sense.
And do you sometimes do these horizontally? I mean, in terms of actually how you get this to stay in place while you're moving it around? Does it sometimes work better on a tabletop, or is it always against the wall?
No, it starts off life as horizontal. I mean, it's, especially with this one, it's a lot of interlocking form, so I kind of start creating a mass or a form like face, and if something's not quite right, I'll burn it and melt it to fit around another piece, and it kind of interlocks, and it's nice because it takes on its own organic feel in some respects, where it makes sense when something curves around another thing or it holds on to another thing. It's more of a physical way of working.
And it seems to me what you're getting closer to with this one, which leads on to the Reclining Nude that we're going to see next, is this sense of kind of form and mass, and yet a space inside of that mass, and almost the viewer being able to see inside the head, inside the kind of anatomical structure of that skull.
Yeah, I mean, this is going back to my learnings with isms and things from the past, and also learning about negative space and how negative space is also just as important as positive space, and how it can be utilised as to the same effect, if you like, and what isn't there is just as important as what is there, and that balance within that language as well is a fascinating thing.
Now this is Reclining Nude, which is traditional female nude. Might remind us of Manet's Olympia or the Venus of Urbino, but there's a more surprising influence on this work. You made a trip to Prague.
That's right. It was just a normal holiday, if you like, but I went to the St. Vitus Cathedral, and the stained glass windows in there, just the use of colour and the luminosity they created was just such a strong kind of, had such a strong impact on me. It was a combination of that and then beginning to work with the perspex and what colours were available. It was just something I wanted to recreate, a kind of almost like a contemporary stained glass window, but in a three-dimensional form.
Sure.
So,
and the beauty of this acrylic perspex, the fluorescent perspex that you're using, is that it has at the edge of itself this kind of concentration of light, which is a really strong line, linear aspect to it. And then you're using flat surfaces, planes of this perspex, to suggest a three-dimensional body. But the transparency of the body is an important thing as well. Talk to us about that, and then in relation to that, the mirror.
I mean, this led on from the thinkings of the see-through Christ, how utilising light within the sculpture to enhance it, if you like. This one, I wanted to use light and bend it using the contours of curving a mirror to kind of recreate the contours of her outline, as the effect as if you're walking into a room and you see a naked woman on the bed. I mean, for me, or most men would most probably shy away from looking directly at her in the face, maybe look around the room anywhere but her. So with a mirror in the room, you would be half tempted to look at the mirror where she wouldn't know where you're looking. So it takes on that form of, if you're concentrating there, a lot of the other vision may be kind of become quite abstracted, if you like. You know the form is there and what parts are where, but and the textures, if you like, the silk sheets, the light bouncing off the certain parts of the body. But takes on kind of quite a kind of surreal form, if you like.
Now these portraits, which are called Untitled portraits number 2 and number 3, number 1 is behind me, are the most recently completed work. So this is really the most direct connection you have with the work that's on display in this show. Tell us about these in relation to the kind of the instinctive versus the figurative mark we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, it's kind of going full circle really, back to the beginnings of my painting, but taking on board what I'd learnt from the sculpture and the studying the 4D aspect of it, and taking that language of materials and then basically trying to flatten it back into a painting where, you know, one gestural mark represents, like for example, this mass of blue coming round, and the red is that kind of density of mass, and then the black spray and the movement expressionism is that shadow of movement. And, you know, this is the kind of, the outline is that, you know, the, what should we call it, expressive outline again. So it's, you know, it's breaking it down again to like 3 or 4 elements from what I've learned, and then just reapplying it to create something new with the colours.
And the colours, let's say, for example, this purple versus this acid green, is quite an Andy Warhol colour. And we were talking earlier about the screen printing effect of this particular striated mark. Tell us a bit about that. When you'd finished these works, I mean, it wasn't in your mind consciously that you were, you know, doing a Marilyn.
No, I mean, not at all. It was a case of coming up with a process of how to create this representation of a moving portrait using different paints, scraping, spray paint, splatting, each language representing a key aspect, either the light, the shadow, the form, the shape, and in that combination, flattening it again, produce the finished result. So you have that combination, so then you can almost set up the factory of, you could work on 5 at a time, but different colour combinations. And the colour combinations came from the learning on a computer, if you like, what colours work and what don't in Photoshop. It was quite funny when I finished looking at them on the floor, they did then look like Andy Warhol colourways, purely by mistake, but also with that logic thinking of a printed factory process, though they are actually paintings in their own right.
How do you surprise yourself? Just thinking now, just briefly about the next stage for you, because you're someone who's not afraid to embrace change. Almost every single work you do or little triptych is a new idea, taking on from what you've learned and building on it. Where do you think it's going? Can you carry on surprising yourself?
It's amazing when you do surprise yourself, because it's a funny feeling, because you think, oh, I can't believe I did that. Or it's a nice feeling, it's a positive feeling. And it takes a lot to get that feeling sometimes, you know.
Because I know you destroy a lot of the work.
Yeah.
Just like Francis Bacon did, taking a razor to something which he'd pushed just over the edge. We're looking at series, quite small series of 3s or 4s of these, and then maybe 10 or 20 that you sometimes it just doesn't work for whatever reason.
Yeah, I mean, I destroyed about last week. I destroyed about nearly 100 drawings, just because. I didn't want to keep them because they weren't right. I'd moved on from that.
And I think the self-editing is something that's a consistent feature of your output as well. You haven't lost that.
No, I mean, you've got to be brutal as well. I think you've got to have some kind of what's the word? Vetting? No, I don't know. You got to
quality control.
Yeah, that's the word. Quality control, I guess, to some extent. I think that comes as part of changing from being outside on the street working to showing stuff on a wall where, you know, people are going to come and see it and criticise it, if you like, or, you know, whatever they want from it. You have to kind of show them your best of that period, if that makes sense.
So would I be right in thinking that the way you feel about your output and the way it's going is like the image that you referred to earlier of the kind of the spiral, that it's a way of kind of returning to what you already know, and then pushing forward and pushing on and pushing?
Yeah, I believe in human progression is an important part of human nature anyway, be it an artist or a musician or a mathematician. It's a linear movement of progressing in a direction, and I believe with creativity you have your periods or movements or ideas, and if you're the guy painting squares and circles, and one day you decide to paint a triangle, it's a jump. And it could be an inspiration, or it could be a logical thing, or you could make a jump of 2 or 3 stages if you think, I'll paint a golden triangle. It's a move forward again, and you didn't have to waste 2 years just painting different coloured triangles to get to that point. Your own thinking and logic, you want to push forward, so you want to do it in the shortest time possible. And especially with this show, if I had an idea, I wanted to jump with it and it felt correct, instead of wasting half a year working towards that by guesswork, it does follow that kind of spiralling movement where, even though it's spiralling, it's going in a direction where it is a linear direction. Well, it's kind of a linear, but it can go off at tangents, but it's a movement. And there's regression and there's progression, but there's an energy force within you. If you work hard and keep going with something, persistence with whatever, something will come of it, positive or negative. And I guess, that's the interesting thing for me, really. It's that kind of keeping with it and belief in yourself of what you want to be producing and creating.
Well, congratulations on a really successful show, and thanks a lot for talking to us today.
Oh, thank you.